I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I love the color in your background, that orange, and then you have that artwork right there.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm just trying to lower this a little bit.
It's fine. Where in California are you right now? In LA?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay. Have you ever been to Puerto Rico in the past?
I have never been to Puerto Rico, actually.
You have not? Well, you should. You should visit it. Yeah, well, it's a beautiful place. I'm sure a lot of your friends have visited before. Claudia, thank you for the opportunity. I am really excited to have this chat. I'm drinking Fiji water. I like to thank them. They're my official water sponsor. And as we talked over WhatsApp, I'm a licensed attorney, and I've been doing wine blogging for a number of years. I've been very much involved with wine culture. I've interviewed more than 300 people, and we're always recommending wines and whatnot. But I think it's very important to touch on the Sinclair method. You're going to get into that in a little bit. And I was very moved by your TED Talk, your story. I was browsing in the internet, and I came across that. And I just want to touch a little bit about your background, about, I don't know, growing up. Were you exposed at an early age to alcohol consumption, for example? And then you can take me a little bit to when you started your career as an actress.
Great. And when you lean forward, I can hear you better. I don't know why, but the sound is very, very low. I had a pretty normal upbringing as far as alcohol goes. My mother's German, so it was more of a European way of treating alcohol, not the larger American consumption. So there was a time on Sunday nights where they would have some wine and have friends over, but it was always with a meal. There wasn't any alcohol abuse when I was growing up. In fact, my father quit drinking in his 40s because he had hepatitis C, and the doctor told him to. So he didn't drink for the majority of my life. And my mom was a very, very light drinker. So there really wasn't any, there wasn't any problem there. We were told that if we wanted to drink, we would have to do it at home. I had 3 older brothers, so that applied to them. It never entered my mind. I mean, I was the normal kid up with my brother. Went out one night, we snuck some band tours from their home bar, but that was about it. There was no adverse use of alcohol in my household growing up. I knew that my grandfather had a problem and he was sober. I knew that my uncle had died of complications from cirrhosis of the liver due to alcoholism, but it wasn't really a subject. I really was a very light drinker in my 20s. I started working very young. I moved out young. I did high school in a short amount of time. I was on an accelerated learning program so I could work because that's what I moved to Los Angeles and be an actor. So I was up in LA by the time I was 16, and I started working on television, got my first series when I was, so there really wasn't time to party. I was right. A hardworking girl, and I reveled in being professional, and I loved my work. So of course I wanted to be professional, and that didn't.
Let me just unplug my AirPods. For some reason, they're not working properly.
I do.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay, great. My AirPods were giving me a little bit of a problem. So when did you first notice that switch in terms of your consumption? I mean, you were very busy when you were in your 20s. You were very much involved with, obviously, movies and series, and I assume stardom at a very young age. But when did you start noticing that the amount was creeping up?
Well, I lived with I had relationships with men who were heavy drinkers in my 30s. And I think that escalated the drinking, but it still wasn't anything that was hurting my life. But it was definitely a slight escalation. One was a restaurateur, so there was lots of wine. The other one was just a nightly drinker, so it was sort of a thing to have wine every night. But if I was filming the next day, I would not, because it makes you look puffy. So I mean, I still had control. It was my late 30s that a boyfriend of mine said to me, he said, I've never seen anyone drink quickly to drink.
Okay. And was wine always the drink of choice, or did you switch? Yeah. Did you mix?
Wine. And I started collecting wine when I was in my 30s. I bought French Futures. I built a cellar. I really was in the whole, I had lots of friends who were collecting wines. My lawyer at the time was a huge wine and member of the Shane group and all these things. So I was hanging out with lots and lots of people who enjoyed good wine. And at that point in my life, once again, it wasn't an issue. But then it wasn't just him. There was a couple other people that said, you drink a lot. I mean, quite often. And
what when you say a lot, was that like a bottle a night?
I would say that when it was starting to escalate, I could easily do a bottle by myself. And also I was prone to drinking at home in front of a fireplace and reading a book, which, as we know, is not really a healthy use of alcohol. Alcohol is sort of a social lubricant and a convivial thing. And in Europe, it's always with food.
Right.
Always with food. And you see people in Italy and France, and people always say, well, they don't have as many alcoholics there. Well, it's the culture. We have a very strong drinking culture in America. Women will save their calories for food, for booze. They won't eat. Kids will purposely drink on an empty stomach because they get a quicker buzz.
And it's cheaper, right? It's cheaper to get a buzz.
It's cheaper to get a buzz at home and then go out. And believe me, I lived in the UK as well, and it's a huge problem there. People will pre-party before the party.
Yeah, and you have a post-party afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, by the time they arrive at the bar, they're already completely loaded because they drank cheap liquor at home, and they only, so it's a culture thing. And unfortunately in America, I don't mean to digress, but there was an article that came out today that is really frightening that said deaths amongst people in their mid-30s to mid-40s has increased in 2 years by almost 30%. Alcohol.
Does marketing and advertising play a role? I mean, because you're saturated and inundated with, and I'm not trying to badmouth the people that make a living through this, but I mean, everywhere you look, it's alcohol, right?
Yes, and it's definitely geared towards children. I mean, Alky Pops, strawberry flavored hard alcohol things that look like lollipops, all of that stuff is geared towards children. Women, please, mommy o'clock, wine o'clock, the mommy juice or whatever. I mean, all of these things are geared towards, and all the TV shows and films are really showing women that it's supposed to be fun and sexy and you deserve it, and all this stuff that I know you don't want to hear this. You run Wine News TV, but
no, it's fine. It's fine. This is something that I think it's important to listen. I'm also trying to learn and provide content for my audience. I do have people that, believe it or not, reach out. We have a solid reach of 150,000 people across all my platforms on any given month. And a lot of people ask about non-alcoholic wine or de-alcoholized wine. So I believe it is important to share this message as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's really important to know that during the pandemic, alcohol use disorders amongst women skyrocketed, and no one's really talking about this. We have the recent study that was done, one of the largest studies on alcohol in the world, with 190 different countries and hundreds and thousands of people, where they determined that basically any amount of alcohol is unsafe for human beings. And of course, no one will talk about that. But during the pandemic, women especially were drawn towards drinking to relieve stress. And what happened is, because they were isolating and using it as a comfort-seeking tool and a stress reliever, they then became dependent on alcohol. I have clients as young as 19 that became physically dependent on alcohol during the pandemic.
I want to touch on that, Claudia, because I've done, my good share of wine drinking, but always in control. I never drink alone. I never drink by myself. Usually I drink with friends, with my wife. I love watching soccer, like we call it football. I'm from South America. I was born in Ecuador. I live in Puerto Rico. So for us, football in England, they call it football, is a big thing, right? Yeah. So, I'm not the kind of person that, for example, watches a football match by myself and drink wine or read a book or drink. It's usually with food and whatnot. My question here is, when would you say, after so many years of drinking a bottle a night, a bottle a day, did you say to yourself, I got to make some amends here. I got to make some changes here?
I would say that my regular drinking probably only lasted 2 to 3 years before I realized I had a problem. So I went from being a light drinker to being a social drinker to being a more regular drinker, like maybe 4 days a week, 5 days a week. And from there, it escalated very quickly into me saying, okay, I better quit. But the problem with that is it created what's known as the alcohol deprivation effect. And what that is that when you're depriving your brain of something that it's used to, you have an initial honeymoon phase of sobriety where you feel great. It usually lasts between 1 and 3 months for most individuals. And then after that, you start craving alcohol and you start seeing it everywhere and you start going out with your friends and you say to yourself, well, I must not have a problem because I just went 3 months without a drink. That's the really insidious thing about addiction. So then you have another drink. And now, because your brain has been starved of that alcohol for that period of time, now you drink even heavier than you did before. So for me, what that translated into was I went from being a heavy drinker, like by myself, a bottle of wine a night, 4 nights a week, to now being a binge drinker, where I had to go off button.
Hey, Claudia, in those 3 nights where you weren't drinking, out of the 7 you were drinking 4, did you ever have the shakes? I mean, did you ever have that physical discomfort for not drinking those 3 days?
Not at that point. Not until I became physically dependent, until I became a binge drinker. That's so I went from light, moderate, social, heavy to abstinence. And once I started drinking after sobriety, that's when I became a binge drinker. And that's when there was no rules, basically off to the racetrack. So my life was broken down after that for the next maybe 5 years into binges and sobriety. And I'll tell you the truth is my sobriety, I was on TSM for 9 years and I've been abstinent for 3.5. But my sobriety back then was miserable because I had such intense cravings. So I couldn't be around my friends who drank. I couldn't go to restaurants. I couldn't go to bars. I was basically a hermit because I was so involved with just staying sober. That was my myopic vision was just, I can't be around alcohol at all. So I was miserable. Now I can be around it all I want. I don't care. Anybody drinks around me. People drink. I don't care. I just don't want it anymore. And that's
So doing the math, you said you were 9 years drinking under TSM and 3 years abstinence. So for the past 12 years, you've been, so to speak, in control.
When I started TSM in 2009, it was an immediate relief. I got rid of the cravings immediately. I took that tablet of naltrexone, I waited an hour, and I could barely even finish that glass of wine. Now, in the years after that, the drinking would go up and down, but I didn't become a binge drinker again. That's the beauty about TSM in my particular case. For other people, they don't identify as alcoholic. So you don't have to say, oh, I'm an alcoholic to use TSM. I have actors, for instance, who need to lose weight and they're drinking too much wine. I have people who are going through a divorce and they're self-medicating with booze and they just want to cut down. That's the beautiful thing about TSM is you do not have to commit to sobriety. You can commit to harm reduction, moderation. All you have to
let's piggyback now, Claudia, because we have some people asking about TSM, the Sinclair method. If you want to touch on that a little bit, and also take us to that incredible movie, the Magic Little Pill. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so the Sinclair method is named after Dr. David Sinclair, who was an American researcher who was studying an alcoholic strain of rats in Finland. And he discovered that he used an opiate antagonist, in this case, naltrexone, to these alcoholic rats, and he gave it to them. They became disinterested in alcohol. They unlearned the desire for alcohol. See, the human brain has the ability to learn actions and also to unlearn them. It's like it has a built-in eraser. It's much like Pavlov's dog. Remember, he used to ring the bell, feed the dog would salivate, and eventually he stopped feeding the dog after ringing the bell, and the dog learned to stop salivating. So what happens when you drink on naltrexone, or nalmefene is available in Europe? These are two sister drugs. They're called opiate antagonists. You have nalmefene, you have naltrexone, and then you have naloxone, which is used for opiate overdose. A lot of people will be familiar with that drug. So let's say you have naltrexone in your brain, you've taken it, you've waited the hour, so it's in your bloodstream and brain, and now you drink alcohol. What you're blocking is the reinforcement, the reward, that feeling that certain people have, like fireworks going off in their head. Now, you still feel the relaxation effect of the alcohol. You can still enjoy your favorite glass of red with a beautiful meal. You can still have champagne on your wedding, but you have an off button all of a sudden. You don't want a third or fourth or fifth glass because you're satisfied with one or two. That's the beauty about TSM, the Sinclair method. It gives you back your off button. It gives you back control. So
would you say that saved your life, the TSM method?
Absolutely saved my life. Absolutely saved my life. And the difference is for me, I was a bit stunted. Most people don't spend 9 years on the Sinclair method. They spend maybe 5 and then they're fine. They give up alcohol. For me, it took longer because I really wasn't addressing all of the issues that came along in recovery. I was really focusing mostly on the biological aspect of addiction, which this medication addresses specifically when used in a targeted manner. And by the way, as an aside for anyone out there who has a gambling problem, this also works for gambling. So okay. That's good to know. For me, I absolutely believe it saved my life because I had tried everything at that point. I had tried rehab and AA and hypnotherapy and vitamin therapy and you name it, I tried everything. And this was
Did you lose job opportunities due to alcohol?
I think because of my weight gain due to drinking so much wine, I probably did. But I was never drunk at work or drank at work or did anything like that. But I was definitely chubby from wine. So that absolutely, for an actress, that's a death sentence.
It is. Let me ask you about your advocacy. I mean, if you go to the internet and you put in your name, you'll see a lot of content related to your life as an actress. But you will also see what you've been doing with TSM. Tell us a little bit about your advocacy and your coaching.
Well, I'll tell you that when I used this method for my own alcohol misuse, and I had a choice. I could have said, wow, this worked for me. I'm just going to be quiet about it and go on with my life and be happy. But I really thought that I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror if I did that, because there are so many people out there suffering and they don't know about this method. So I asked the publisher of the book that saved my life, Dr. Roy Escapa's The Cure for Alcoholism. I asked him, I said, what can I do? And he said, write a book. So I wrote a book called Babylon Confidential. And then after that, I realized we're a visual society, so I have to make a movie. So I raised funds with all of my sci-fi fans, and we raised enough money to make One Little Pill. And One Little Pill is a documentary that I made. It's under an hour long, and it was designed specifically for the loved ones of people who are suffering, to educate them on this method and explain this.
How can people watch it? How can I share the content? And is it free or you have to pay for it?
On Amazon, I don't know if they're charging for it. It used to be free on Amazon. It is also on onelittlepillmovie.com, and the $3 that it costs to rent goes directly to my nonprofit organization to help us do programs and so forth. So it's a good cause. So either onelittlepillmovie.com or Amazon. I believe it's on Tubi as well. There's various on streaming places where you can watch it. So after I made the film, I realized, well, now we need a place where everybody can find resources. So I opened c3foundation.org in 2013. We're going to be 10 years old next year. And in that, literally the United States has gone from having one doctor who was supporting patients on TSM when I started it, to the entire country being covered now. So anybody in the United States, and this is why I was asking you, do you know any doctors in Puerto Rico?
I'm working on it. Part of my lawyer life is working with doctors in health law. So they're doing the research for me. When you say you have a network of doctors, I mean, these are the doctors that prescribe the pill and take care of the patients? How does that work?
These are doctors that will support you doing TSM. And the difference between just prescribing naltrexone, here, let me go back a little bit. The FDA approved naltrexone in the mid 1990s for alcoholism, but they put in the label, and they told doctors to prescribe it with abstinence. So most doctors were telling patients to take it in the morning and don't drink. Well, what happens in the morning? What are you blocking? You're blocking sex, eating spicy breakfast, your beautiful cup of coffee, playing with your children, playing with your pets, all these endorphins from life you're blocking. And by the time cocktail time runs around 5 or 6 p.m., the naltrexone is wearing off in your body. So it makes no sense to prescribe it this way. So what we did is we compiled a bunch of doctors under telemedicine or in office doctors on our website, where they will support you doing targeted use of naltrexone, meaning you take the naltrexone 1 hour prior to the first drink of the day every time you drink. So not only will you get the prescription, yes, there's also telemedicine companies that will give you a comprehensive program with a drink app, or however fancy you want to go, you can do TSM. You can even go to a luxury inpatient facility now in North Carolina, or you can do it at home in the privacy. I have airline pilots, police officers, lawyers, people who have a pressing need for privacy do this treatment because they can do it at home. You simply get the prescription and you read the book. You can email me. I'll send you a PDF.
Is the pill affordable? I mean, does it have a hefty cost, or is it reasonably priced?
If you have health insurance, it's either free or it's maybe $5 or $10 for 30 pills. If you don't,
why isn't this better known? Like, for example, I don't want to compare, but Nicorette, for people who are trying to quit smoking, right? Everybody knows about that brand. Why is this like a hidden thing?
Because Chantix and Nicorette and Viagra and all of these pills are owned by pharma companies, and they're not generic. They're patented. This is a generic medication. There's no monetization. There's no impetus for some big pharma company to say, hey, let's rebrand naltrexone as the TSM pill, because it's a cheap, affordable drug that lots of different pharma companies make. Naltrexone is also used for fibromyalgia, for certain cancers, for sleep issues. I mean, it's really a remarkable drug. It's a remarkable medication. But to answer your question really specifically, why is this not more well known? Let me ask you this. What if I gave 100 people this cheap little pill and 78% of them got better? What is that going to do to the rehab multi-billion-dollar industry? It's going to directly adversely affect their business model, which is a revolving door. We have
Freddie saying it's an amazing medication. We have a lot of people commenting. I cannot take care of all the comments. A lot of people are actually commenting, saying great things about the pill. So when you say that there's pressure, and I know about this as a lawyer and I've worked in government, so you have the pharma or who's lobbying against this? Is it the liquor industry or the pharma industry? The rehab industry?
First of all, America and many other countries are abstinent-based. This is just in our society. AA has taken over the entire vernacular of the recovery community. If you use, you're not sober. Harm reduction is only a recently introduced idea. Moderation is a recently introduced idea. And unfortunately, moderation management got a bad name because its founder was in a drunk driving accident. This is different. This actually undoes compulsive behavior in the brain. This is not a Band-Aid. This is a fix. I tell people, as long as you stay on the medication and you continue to take that medication an hour before you drink, you're in remission. That you are in remission for the rest of your life. You will not overdrink. And in the meantime, you can also work on habits and the reasons why you drink. It gives you clarity so that if you do want to go to therapy and work on the underlying issues, you can hear your therapist because you're not craving emotionally, physically, mentally. You have no cravings anymore. So you can do.
Is the end result of the Sinclair method to achieve abstinence eventually? Or could people, for example, take the pill and keep drinking moderately 1-2 glasses a night for the rest of their life?
That is the majority of the people who do TSM want to be simply normal drinkers. And that's the gift of this. It returns them to normal drinkers. The thing I hear all the time is, oh my gosh, I'm drinking like I did in my 20s. I just leave it half a glass there, or I forget about drinking that night. That's the beauty of TSM. So you can turn back the clock and go back to when you were a normal drinker. And most people do. About 25 to 30% of people end up going abstinent. My goal was harm reduction when I started TSM, but I've found great joy in abstinence simply because I look better, I feel better, I have more energy, and I sleep better. And for women my age, with the addition of hormones and all this stuff, sometimes it's just better to stop because alcohol does upset the circadian rhythm, so it upsets your sleep. So sometimes.
Right. And a lot of people may ask any side effects because there has to be a trade-off, right, with this pill. Like, do you have any side effects? Tremors, dry mouth, anything?
No. The most common side effect is nausea, but that goes away. Most side effects dissipate within a week. I took it on an empty stomach, stupidly, because I didn't know any better, and I started with the full tablet. What we recommend and what doctors recommend is that you start with a half a tablet and titrate up or work up to the full tablet. But if you have no side effects, then go for it. What I felt when I took it was I felt stoned. I felt like I had a medication in my system. But remember, I was 3 months sober when I started TSM, and I took it on an empty stomach, and I don't take drugs of any kind or prescription medications. So I had a very clean system. People who are actively drinking usually have no side effects. That's the funny thing. When they start taking the naltrexone, they just pop the pill and they're like, oh, I didn't feel anything. The other side effect is either you get a little bit sleepy or sleeplessness. But once again, that goes away in a few days, and it's a small price to pay to getting your control back of your drinking. It's a very small price to pay.
We have Gloria. She's been commenting a lot. Gloria Maryhan, I think it's her last name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Thank you for your comments. She's been speaking great things about the pill and how it's worked for her. Let me ask you about it without naming names, of course, but you know Hollywood very well. Would you say that alcohol is a bigger thing than drugs, what we know as regular drugs? I mean, marijuana, cocaine. Is alcohol a bigger issue? Bigger sort of?
The only legal drug besides cigarettes. I mean, it's really the only lethal, deadly drug that's completely legal and available everywhere besides tobacco. So yeah, it's a problem. And it's funny, it's reducing a little bit now. When I started working in Hollywood in the 80s, people would drink during the day. A lot less people. People are more health-minded now, but still, I would say that it's an entirely too popular crutch for people. Oh, I had a hard day, let's have a drink. Oh, my kids are screaming, let's have a drink. So they're not learning any other way to deal with life other than self-medication. And yes, it can lead to other drugs, and yes, it can ruin people's lives. So it is an extremely dangerous thing when it's misused. Once again, anything in moderation is a lot safer than abusing it. But the problem is that people are not learning how to deal with stress and anxiety without the help of a substance. And the really bad thing about alcohol is that if you use it for anxiety, it actually creates more anxiety, because once it wears off, your cortisol levels go skyrocketing. I'm talking about people who abuse alcohol, not people who are in Spain.
Yeah, I mean, when
they're tapas, that's a whole different thing. I'm talking about people who are coming home, drinking a 12-pack, and then starting on shots. I mean, that's not healthy use of alcohol, period.
Right, exactly. And a question that I have is, because some people rely on drinking because it's an outlet and there's an underlying cause, right? Maybe, an general anxiety disorder, maybe there's a clinical depression or of trauma of some kind. Does the pill works in reducing your craving for alcohol, and then eventually you can focus on improving your life by dealing with a therapist on the other issues?
Yes. In fact, we've discovered that people over the years, people who have peer support, we have peer support meetings. We have an online forum, Facebook pages, and live meetings every day of the week in different time zones. We find that people who have support, whether it's at home or with other people on TSM, whether they attend these meetings or just get a good therapist, they do much better on TSM, because it does address the biological aspect of addiction, but it's not going to change your habits for you, and it's not going to stop you from trying to self-medicate. So if you had a traumatic childhood, or you're suffering from the loss of a child or the breakup of a marriage, and you're using alcohol to stomp down your emotions, the pill will probably help you get your drinking reduced a little bit, but it's not going to help your emotional discomfort. That's something you need to work on. It's not a fix-all. It's a tool to use in your recovery for harm reduction and for moderation, or for abstinence.
When I saw your TED Talk, I was very taken by the amount of data you shared, the statistics. And out of, I don't know, 100 people that drink, how many do you think are really moderate drinkers that have no issue whatsoever? Half? Less than half?
It's pretty scary, because the statistics say that 1 out of 3 American adults will have some form of alcohol use disorder.
33%. So 3 in 10 are consuming way much more than what's...
And that has gone up, as I just said in the beginning of our talk. The most recent statistics is that within that age group of 33 to 44, I believe it was, that alcohol-related deaths have gone up 25 to 30%. So that means that there is a subset of individuals who are poisoning themselves on a regular basis. I have clients who come to me and say, well, I have only like 5 or 6 glasses of wine a night. And I'm saying, 5 or 6 glasses of wine 7 nights a week. That's considered binge drinking for men or women. That's considered binge drinking. I mean, I think people also don't understand that a normal pour, a restaurant pour, is tiny. It's like 3 ounces.
Yeah. Where would you fit the people that don't drink Monday to Thursday, and they say, well, you know, I drink a lot. I have a bottle on Friday and a bottle on Saturday. Would they fall in the category? Like, how do you make that assessment, right? Like when a person has a problem.
Here's my number one rule. You ask yourself this one question: is alcohol negatively impacting my life in any way? That's all you ask. Is alcohol negatively impacting my life in any way?
At any given point, right? It doesn't have to be all year, right? It can be like once a month or once a week. Or
if you have a blowout fight with your wife once a month because you're drinking too much on a Friday night with your guy friends, that's negatively impacting your life.
Right.
If you got drunk when you took your kids to school, that's a negative impact. If you lost your job, if you're getting overweight, if your liver scan came back negative, if you're grumpy, if you're hungover in the morning, if your quality of life isn't that great, you simply ask yourself that one question: is alcohol negatively impacting my life at all in any way? And if it is, do something to reduce it. Reduce harm. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you don't have to label yourself as somebody who's abusing it or alcoholic. I mean, I hated that. I never wanted to stand up and say, oh, I'm an alcoholic for the rest of my life. I wanted to say I used to have a drinking problem, which I can say now. I used to have a drinking problem. I don't anymore. I don't like labels. I think words are very powerful. I don't believe in calling someone an addict for life or an alcoholic for life. I think this is something that people go in phases. They go through stress. They go through difficult times in life. And what is the easiest thing to self-medicate with? Go to your local liquor store and buy some booze and go home and forget about your problems. So people have taken that to the nth degree, especially during the pandemic. And that's why I think methods like the Sinclair method are so needed right now. Alcohol use disorders are skyrocketing amongst men and children younger.
Would you say that after writing the book and putting out the documentary, the numbers, the awareness of the TSM method and the pill has gone up? Have you seen results? I mean, is it where you want it to be in terms of reach?
Well, of course, it's not where I want it to be. I want it to be the go-to method everywhere in the world. I mean, I taught in India, and of course, for them, it's a price thing. Most of the men that I met in the small communities who were drinking too much, they only make $1 a day. How can they afford a tablet that costs 50 cents? That's half their paycheck for the day. So you have that financial disparity in third world countries or in places that don't have an infrastructure for addiction treatment. So you have that. And then, of course, there's the whole aspect of saying, Yes, now the whole country's covered, all of Canada is covered, but the whole world should be covered with doctors who understand this. There's no reason why a doctor should deny an individual, a patient who comes to them and says, I need to reduce my drinking. And the doctor, in every form of laziness, says, go to an AA meeting or just cut down. That's like telling someone not to breathe. Once you have a compulsive disorder of the brain, you don't have any control over this. I'm a very smart, strong woman. I'm a dedicated, hardworking woman. For this to affect me, it was scary because I was not in my driver's seat. I was not in control. So I understand it.
Right. I was thinking precisely that. I mean, you've achieved incredible things in your career as an actress. You've traveled the world. You've made good money, and then this took a hold of you. Imagine what it would do for a person that is not as accomplished, right?
Nothing to do with how smart you are or how much willpower you have. That's a bunch of BS. You can't pray this away. Your brain changes. Your neural pathways get engorged. If you have the genetic predisposition and you engage in the behavior, in this case, drinking, your neural pathways become bigger and bigger and bigger. And the only way to fix that is to shrink them down again. And by drinking on an opiate antagonist, it does exactly that. It rewires your brain so you feel normal again. You walk by a liquor store and you're not triggered to want to drink. You go out with friends, you're not the last man standing at the bar. That's why this method works for the average person, because you're still allowed to drink. In fact, you have to drink on this method. The only time...
Do you have someone like... Let me ask you this, because I'm coming up with ideas. Have you ever had a person that does not have a drinking problem? I mean, you just said that this is not for everyone. If you have 1-2 glasses per week, you're fine. I mean, you don't need it. But have you ever had a person give it a try to see if it works? What have they said? Does it work on people who are really in control? Does it work for them as well?
The journalist Gabrielle Glazer, who's written about wonderful, she's been published in the New York Times and Reader's Digest and lots of big periodicals, and she's written a wonderful book on women and drinking. She decided for research, she also met Dr. Sinclair when he was alive. She decided that she was going to try naltrexone and see what it was all about. And she was a normal drinker. She didn't have a drinking problem, and she just wanted.
And what was her conclusion?
Her conclusion was that it works even for someone who doesn't have a problem. People use it for sugar addiction. People use it for, as I said, gambling, online addictions, porn addiction. So it's basically you're in the reward center of the brain and you're blocking the endorphins from that certain behavior, and eventually your brain learns to not need it anymore because it's not getting the reinforcement from the activity or the alcohol.
Wow. This is incredible, Claudia. Thank you so much. I've used 40 minutes of your time. This is way too much for a very busy person like yourself. I will be sharing this in my YouTube channel, all my platforms. Please send me via WhatsApp. I'm fortunate to have your contact. All the links that I could post with my video. And I am thinking of actually giving this a try for research purposes. Eventually, I'll reach out to you to see if I do it. Because, I think if I have an important number of people who follow me, I should be using it not just to say, oh, this is a great Bordeaux, this is a great cab, but also for people who may be struggling, right? Because at the end of the day, that's 65% of the people who have no issue with alcohol and they drink moderately. They deserve to have someone communicating something that I love. But that 33, 35, perhaps creeping into the 40%, it's also very important that we take care of their issues, right?
Yeah, and I'm happy to send you all the materials that anybody needs. Also, of course, on my nonprofit organization's website, everything you need to do TSM is there. But most of all, we need to make the medication accessible in Puerto Rico. That would be amazing.
I will get you a doctor that eventually will reach out, and we will make this available. I mean, we do have issues of consumption here. We are an island that produces tons of rum, and we have a very vigorous I would say drinking crowd here in terms of society at large. Latin America pretty much is a very large drinking society. I guess everywhere in the world. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Thank you for all that you do, and I hope you get to visit Puerto Rico one day.
I would love to, and thank you for allowing me this platform to speak about this life-saving method. I really appreciate it.
Take care and keep up the good work. I really admire you. Bye-bye.
So much.